When I began writing that book, I discovered from the CIA files that the Hungarian people, when they started that uprising, it began as an anti-Jewish pogrom. It was essentially an anti-Jewish revolution and not an anti-communist revolution to begin with. The Hungarian people regarded their government in the 1950s as being a Jewish government. And they regarded the secret police, the dreaded Államvédelmi Hatóság, the AVH, as being a Jewish secret police. And essentially it was, because when the Red Army entered Hungary in 1945, they brought back into Hungary all the Jews who had taken refuge in the Soviet Union, and they were the ones who got the plum jobs, and they were the ones who got the trustworthy jobs as secret police chiefs and as torturers. And that's why the Jews were so hated in Hungary by 1956, because they were regarded as the people who had inflicted this nameless misery on the Hungarian people. And so the uprising began as an anti-Jewish uprising. Every one of the Hungarian leaders at that time in 1956, Rákosi and Farkas and György and the rest of the Hungarian leaders, they were all Jews, and I never realized that when I set out to write it. It's an extraordinary fact, the way these things are kept away from the public consciousness.
There's a new man, it seems, at the top of the pile of Russia's super rich. Vladimir Lysin is the man with the money, showing enough business spark to amass a fortune of $19 billion. The steel tycoon was declared Russia's richest by the Finance magazine. The previous year's leader, Mikhail Prokhorov, was second, while Chelsea Football Club owner Roman Abramovich was rated third. Despite the economic crisis, the top 10 earners boosted their wealth by billion, good heavens, $billion to reach a staggering $140 billion. You can barely imagine it, can you?
The statement Henry Kissinger is a war criminal is a statement I've been making for many years. It's now not a piece of rhetoric, not a metaphor. It's a job description.
Across the U.S., Hitchin's improbable crusade attracted interest. With a pen for a lance, he was tilting at the windmill of Kissinger's reputation.
Can't have it said that I'm an anti-Semite or a Nazi sympathizer. That, I'm sorry, is too much. It crosses my line. And Dr. Kissinger by now will have heard, I think, from my lawyers, that he's to cease and desist from saying what he knows to be false.
I was not concerned that Kissinger would sue Harper's Magazine, because then Kissinger, would have to go to some form of legal disclosure. I mean, if you accuse the magazine or you accuse Hitchens of libel, then that allows our lawyers to ask questions and subpoena documents and try to establish the truth of the matter, and that is not something I think that Kissinger would welcome.
Kissinger's critics charge that his worldview blinded him to the human cost of the Cold War. Recently released documents reveal episodes in Indochina, Indonesia, and Chile, where Kissinger needlessly sacrificed human lives to pursue strategic goals.
That this man could operate at such a horrible level and not get exposed for year after year after year after year. How many people came out against him? It's an embarrassment to my profession. I gotta tell you, the dark side of Henry Kissinger is very, very dark.
wars were fought. And in order to fight a war, governments had to borrow money. They borrowed money from these central banks. The central banks waxed rich because they loaned money and charged interest. Then took over when one side prevails against the other. And when governments could not satisfy the indebtedness, then some of the natural wealth of that country flowed to the bankers. They would loan money to both sides in the conflict because they really didn't care who won or who lost. I mean, it's hurtful, but a Jew, Rothschild, loaned money to Adolf Hitler. A Jew, Rothschild. God damn it, you better not open your mouth to call me no anti-Semite.
Yep. So somebody just threw a water balloon at us. And now there's a crowd gathering because they're going to, they're saying that they're going to chase us away, and they're gathering numbers now. So there's a big flock of people that's going to chase us. Yeah, I'm not. So I'm not allowed to talk to anybody in the country? I'd say we're not very wanted around here. This place is no joke. We were down there just trying to talk to people. We found enough peace here today. It's no joke. I'm going to my car. I'm going to my car. Dude. Yeah.
Jewish.
I'm going to my car. There's so many things that are wrong. Dude, this is messed up. There goes my friend. See you.
You ask you and you fucking Jesus to kiss my ass, okay?
Go away.
Screw you. Whoa. Don't camera, no camera. I break it. We killed Jesus, we're proud of it. Where are you?
Did you record that?
Get the fuck out of here. This is my land, you.
This is not your land, it belongs to these families.
Land, you son of a bitch. I'm gonna kill you and the person. This is my land. God gave it to me. Fuck you. This is my house, this is my land. God gave it to me. And fuck you.
Jesus is a bastard. I will have the last word. Yeah, 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 yeah. Jesus is a bastard.
Alternate Focus interviews Akai Sharon and Noam Kayut, both veterans of the Israeli Defense Forces. After thorough introspection, these young men have chosen to speak out about their experiences as self-described brutal occupiers of a disputed land.
Hundreds of thousands of families that couldn't have one peaceful night of sleep in their homes. I mean, who in today in the USA, in Israel, and anywhere else would be willing to live like that? Not knowing if at 2 o'clock in the morning 20 soldiers will take over your house for a week. Not knowing, sitting in your living room and suddenly hearing smashing on the wall and there is a hole in the wall, and suddenly 20 soldiers come to visit.
A girl begged soldiers not to demolish her home's wall, but in vain. Soldiers commonly smash walls to get into adjacent houses. The army blew off the door and inside found Huda Hawaja mortally wounded on the floor. Ismail Hawaja clearly thought at that point his wife would live. He begged the army to let an ambulance through. There were delays. The camera captured the terror of the woman's young daughter and her brother's attempt to stop her from showing the soldiers her fear. After the mother was finally taken out, one of the soldiers spoke to the news crew. I don't know what we're doing here, he said. Purification, maybe. It's dirty here. I don't know why a good Hebrew boy should be here so far from his home.
What's your assessment of what Israel is doing in Gaza?
I can answer you with 2 words: a war crime. My government is now engaged in a massive war crime, killing hundreds of innocents. It's not just a war crime against the Palestinians, it's a crime against the Israeli people. And on behalf of thousands of Israelis that are demonstrating right now in the streets of Tel Aviv, in Jerusalem, and in many other places, with Palestinians, with internationals, people from all kind of background and all parts of the Israeli society are completely ashamed and against this crazy assault. We know that you cannot kill, as Jewish people, we know that you cannot kill the desire of people to be free. As a Jewish person that was raised on all these values of liberation and humanity and freedom, we cannot kill the desire of the Palestinian people to live in freedom. And on behalf of those people in Israel and in the world, I want to call the international community, the Jewish community in the world, and everyone that listens to me now, please join our force to stop this massive killing. Please, for the sake of Israel, for the sake of Palestine, and for the sake of the world.
Rachel Corey, a 23-year-old American student, went to Gaza to join in these efforts, sending back emails to her parents.
I have been in Palestine for 2 weeks and 1 hour now, and I still have very few words to describe what I see. I don't know if many of the children here have ever existed without tank shell holes in their walls, and the towers of an occupying army surveying them constantly from the near horizons. I think, although I'm not entirely sure, that even the smallest of these children understand that life is not like this everywhere.
And the bulldozer drove up, and it kept going, and she tried to move back, but she couldn't move back, and she got caught underneath. She got caught underneath the bulldozer. Many other internationals began to surround the bulldozer and yell at it and tell us that there is somebody there, and it did not stop.
Where Rachel was killed, she was protecting a doctor's home, and that's important to realize. And the 3 children and his wife.
Stop! 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 You're shooting at kids.
Everybody throw stones to you while you shoot! Oh God, I got hit in the leg. It's the back of the leg. Okay. Yes, let's do it! I got hit in the thigh and my left leg, and then when I went down, the gas just overcame me. It's terrible what's happening here in Palestine. They're suffering so much. They can't even have a voice here to protest non-violently. And really, this is a disgrace. It's a disgrace what's happening to the Palestinian people. This was a total non-violent protest by the Palestinian and Israeli and internationals today. And we were treated with gas and bullets and not even allowed me in the fence. This has got to stop. The international community must take steps here to see that there's justice brought. People should not be asked to live like this. Come to Palestine, see how these people are suffering. They're like inside a prison here. There is not one day that their lives are not totally controlled by Israeli government. It's like a prison cell here with Israel holding the key to it. Palestine deserves better than this. Little children deserve better than this. The world ignores it and says nothing because nobody wants to offend Israel.
The smile of a little girl too young to understand she will probably never walk again. In parts of Jabalia, there's not a house left standing. We did have Sama's photo. They'd heard a story that they didn't recognize the face. But then just as we were beginning to give up hope, a man strolling behind the car suddenly spotted the picture. How is she? He asked.
She can't walk.
The tank was over here, he said. It was 10 to 1 in the afternoon. We were told to come out of the house, the women, and my 3 daughters, Samar, Amal, and Soad. Then he said a soldier came out of the tank carrying an M16 rifle, and he started to shoot at the children. Some of the soldiers were eating chocolate and crisps. 7-year-old Soad died instantly. This is her teddy bear. He showed me her picture from the mortuary. Amal died later. From the wreckage of the house, Khaled is still gathering mementos.
A week ago, in the Egyptian town of El Arish, we heard the details of this story, which was sufficiently shocking for us to come here and find Sama's father. Today, we've heard the same account, almost word for word, allegations of the most serious kind.
I was brought up as an Orthodox Jew and a Zionist. I first went to Israel in 1961, and I've been there since more times than I can count. I've known most of the prime ministers of Israel. My grandmother was ill in bed when the Nazis came to her hometown of Stashov. A German soldier shot her dead in her bed. Madam Deputy Speaker, my grandmother did not die to provide cover for Israeli soldiers murdering Palestinian grandmothers in Gaza. Irgun, together with the terrorist Stern Gang, massacred 254 Palestinians in 1948 in the village of Deir Yassin. However many Palestinians the Israelis murder in Gaza, they cannot solve this existential problem by military means. They could have negotiated with Fatah's previous leader, Yasser Arafat, who was a friend of mine. Instead, they besieged him in a bunker in Ramallah, where I visited him. Whenever and however the fighting ends, there will still be 1.5 million Palestinians in Gaza and 2.5 million more Palestinians in the West Bank who are treated like dirt by the Israelis, with hundreds of roadblocks and with the ghastly denizens of the illegal Jewish settlements harassing them as well. The time will come, not so long from now, when they will outnumber the Jewish population in Israel. It's time for our government to make clear to the Israeli government that its conduct and policies are unacceptable and to impose a total arms ban on Israel. It is time for peace, but real peace, not the solution by conquest, which is the Israelis' real goal, but which is impossible for them to achieve. They're not simply war criminals, they're fools.
Today, Queen Elizabeth II is the head of state of the great nation of the Hebrew Covenant called Great Britain. Her genealogy chart, according to the College of Heralds in London, traces her blue bloodline back to Abraham, who many modern scholars believe to be the Egyptian pharaoh, Amenemhet I. By connecting 22 dots, the true Hebrew and royal Egyptian identity of Queen Elizabeth II comes into focus. Number 1. What is the stone of Jacob, a Hebrew patriarch, doing beneath the Queen's throne chair? Number 2. Why was the Queen crowned at her coronation ceremony on top of a symbolic Egyptian step pyramid? Number 3. The monarch's crown has 12 stones at the base, each representing the 12 Hebrew tribes. The 12 stones of the 12 tribes were also worn on the breastplate of Hebrew high priests in Canaan. Number 4. The Union Jack represents the reunion of the United Kingdom of the 12 tribes of Jacob, or Jacob. The Union Jack is red, white, and blue, the same colors as the 3 crowns of Egypt. Number 5. The royal scepter originates in ancient Egypt and was carried by the Egyptian god Amun and by Egyptian pharaohs, who called themselves the Son of God. The royal scepter is now carried by pharaonic descendant Queen Elizabeth II. Her scepter contains the world's largest cut diamond, called the Star of Africa. Number 6. The Queen's punishing flail or whip is partially hidden under her arm. The flail or whip also originates with the pharaohs of ancient Egypt. Number 7. The symbol of the bee can be found within the Queen's royal wardrobe. In ancient Egypt, bees were the symbol of Egyptian royalty, as well as the symbol of Egypt. Number 8. The symbols on the British coat of arms reveal Britain's Hebrew origin. According to the Bible, the harp symbolizes the Hebrew King David. The biblical lion and unicorn holding up the shield symbolize the nation of Israel. The motto, Dieu et mon droit, means God and my right, indicating the divine right of the British monarch to an eternal throne. Number 9. The headdress worn by judges and the Queen's high-ranking officials originate in ancient Egypt. Number 10. Kilts, like the one worn by Prince Charles, originate with the Egyptian pharaohs who wore white kilts. Number 11. The hymn, Zadok the Priest, written by Handel, was performed at the Queen's coronation in 1952. Zadok the Priest was the biblical priest who anointed the Hebrew King Solomon while the people cried, "God save King Solomon! Long live King Solomon! May the king live forever!"
God save Queen Elizabeth. Long live Queen Elizabeth. May the Queen live forever.
Number 12. During the coronation ceremony, the Queen turns to face the 4 corners of the globe. The orb carried by the Queen represents the globe over which the monarch rules. Number 13. The monarch's coronation gifts of a rod, bracelets, and a ring are a reenactment of the Bible story of the Hebrews, Judah, and Tamar. Number 14. Royal jubilees originate in ancient Egypt. Egyptian pharaohs celebrated their jubilees after 30 years of rule. In pharaonic tradition, the queen has celebrated both silver and golden jubilees. Number 15. Incest was practiced by ancient Egyptian royalty. Mothers married sons and brothers married sisters to keep the power and the money all in the family. Like their pharaonic ancestors, the British monarchy have a long history of incestuous inbreeding. Number 16. The corpses of deceased pharaohs were preserved and entombed beneath their pyramid temples. The corpses of 19 deceased British monarchs are also preserved in marble tomb slabs beneath the modern-day temple called Westminster Abbey. Number 17. The ancient pharaohs advertised their power with their image on coins and stone monuments. The power of the queen worldwide is advertised with her image printed on more coins and stamps than any other head of state in history. Number 18. The structure of government in ancient Egypt was a step pyramid model, with the Grand Vizier and priesthood one step below the pharaoh. Today's monarchy reigns using a much more sophisticated pyramid model of authority. The covenant that the biblical God gave to Abraham was a promise to make his name great and to make for him a great nation. Today, Great Britain is the only nation called great. In Hebrew, the word Britain literally means land of the covenant, and British means man of the covenant. How on earth did the Hebrew throne of ancient Egypt and Canaan end up in Great Britain under Queen Elizabeth II? Historically, a series of powerful invaders, the Philistines, Assyrians, Babylonians, and Persians, conquered the land of Canaan, which the Hebrews called Israel. The Hebrew tribes of Manasseh and Dan joined forces and became the Macedonians, or Macedonians. They fled to Greece with their gold and their riches. They wore white kilts like the Egyptian pharaohs, played goatskin bagpipes, adopted the Greek culture, and settled along the river Danube, which they named after the tribe of Dan. By 322 BC, their leader, Alexander the Great, reconquered Egypt and appointed his general Ptolemy I as the new Hebrew pharaoh of Egypt. When Napoleon and his troops stormed into Frankfurt, Germany, William feared for his life and his vast fortune. He left $3 million in the hands of Mayor Rothschild to pay the Hessian soldiers. Then he escaped to Denmark to stay with his royal relatives, all of whom were descendants of the tribe of Dan. Mayor Rothschild received a stock market tip from his World Revolutionary Network. Instead of paying the Hessian soldiers with the $3 million that was left to him by William, he bet the money on his insider stock market tip. With his new fortune, Mayor Rothschild set up 5 family banks to be run by each of his 5 sons in London, Paris, Naples, Frankfurt, and Vienna. On September 19, 1812, Mayor Rothschild died at the age of 68. He left instructions that the amount of the inheritance must never be made public, that secrecy and ruthlessness must be used in all business practices, and that family members must intermarry with their own blood relatives to keep the family fortune all in the family. All 5 brothers dedicated themselves to their ancestors' world revolutionary dream. That dream was to control the entire world under one world ruler by disarming the nations of the world. Mayer Rothschild's most successful sons were Nathan, who ran the London Bank, and James, who ran the Paris Bank. Together, they changed the face of history and became known throughout Europe as the Demon Brothers. Their father had given them a detailed New World Order plan for world control. Adam Weishaupt wrote and completed the plan on May 1st, 1776 with Rothschild financing. It was a futuristic plan that would put New World Order members over the next centuries into political power positions. It was a plan to divide and conquer the nations of the world by provoking wars, then profiting from war loans and from the sale of weapons to both sides. Exhausted by war, terror, and chaos, humanity would eventually bow down to one world ruler and one world army as a solution. Nathan and James Rothschild came up with a scheme that would put the Illuminati plan for world control into action. It would also make them filthy rich. The brothers helped finance both sides of Napoleon's famous Battle of Waterloo between the French and the English. With advanced knowledge of the British victory, Nathan Rothschild spread lies that the British had been defeated, which caused a stock market crash. While panicked English investors sold their life savings, Nathan bought up their market shares for pennies on the dollar. When official news of the British victory over Napoleon was announced, the English stock market skyrocketed, and so did Nathan's wealth. In one foul swoop, the Demon Brothers had double-crossed the English masses and taken control of the Bank of England. Flaunting their stupendous wealth, the brothers went on a lavish spending spree. They bought mansions, fashionable clothes, and hosted extravagant parties. According to plan, the brothers formed the world's first international bank and named it N.M. Rothschild and Sons. The Pope became their most famous customer. The Catholic Church, which had financed the wholesale slaughter, torture, and looting of hundreds of thousands of Muslims during the Christian Crusades, were now doing business with the Demon Brothers. By 1823, the Rothschilds were guardians of the entire papal treasure and took over the financial operations of the Catholic Church. Enraged citizens accused the Rothschilds of conspiring to control the world's money markets. Fearing for their lives, the Rothschilds retreated into the shadows and cast their eyes on the youthful United States of America. To avoid publicity, the Rothschilds made themselves invisible by creating and hiding behind 2 front companies, J.P. Morgan and Kuhn and Loeb.
More and more power was becoming concentrated in fewer and fewer hands. By 1906, J.P. Morgan's bank controlled 1/3 of America's railways and almost 70% of the steel industry. He eventually had a stake in the major companies of the 20th century, among them AT&T, ITT, General Electric, General Motors, and DuPont.
At one point, Morgan made the offhanded comment, "America is good enough for me." And the newspaper of William Jennings Bryan retorted, "Whenever you're tired of it, you can give it back." I mean, that was the image of J.P. Morgan, the owner of the United States.
It is important to understand the difference between the term Jews, Hebrews, and Zionists. The majority of the world's Jewish population are honest, caring, honorable people who practice Judaism, follow religious tradition, and embrace good moral values. The term Hebrew refers to the Hebrew language. It also refers to the Hebrew people who are the ethnic descendants of the original 12 tribes of Israel. The term Zionist refers to political extremists. Zionists believe that the Hebrews are God's chosen race of people and that the Hebrews have a right to the land of the Muslim Palestinians.
Bernays is almost completely unknown today, but his influence on the 20th century was nearly as great as his uncle's. Because Bernays was the first person to take Freud's ideas about human beings and use them to manipulate the masses. He showed American corporations for the first time how they could make people want things they didn't need by linking mass-produced goods to their unconscious desires. Out of this would come a new political idea of how to control the masses. By satisfying people's inner selfish desires, one made them happy and thus docile. It was the start of the all-consuming self, which has come to dominate our world today.
I mean, democracy really, the idea of democracy at its heart was about changing the relations of power that had governed the world for so long. And Bernays' concept of democracy was one of maintaining the relations of power, even if it meant that one needed to sort of stimulate the psychological lives of the public. And in fact, in his mind, that was what was necessary. That if you can keep stimulating the irrational self, then leadership can basically go on doing what it wants to do.
Bernays now became one of the central figures in a business elite that dominated American society and politics in the 1920s.
People who worked for him were stupid, and children were stupid, and if people did things in a way that he wouldn't have done them, they were stupid. It was a word that he used over and over and over, dope and stupid.
And the masses?
They were stupid.
As a part of the war effort, the US government set up a Committee on Public Information, and Bernays was employed to promote America's war aims in the press. The President, Woodrow Wilson, had announced that the United States would fight not to restore the old empires, but to bring democracy to all of Europe. Bernays proved extremely skillful in promoting this idea, both at home and abroad. And at the end of the war, he was asked to accompany the President to the Paris Peace Conference.
Then, to my surprise, they asked me to go over with Woodrow Wilson to the peace conference. And at the age of 26, I was in Paris for the entire time of the peace conference that was held in the suburb of Paris, and we worked to make the world safe for democracy. That was a big slogan.
Wilson's reception in Paris astounded Bernays and the other American propagandists. Their propaganda had portrayed Wilson as a liberator of the people, a man who would create a new world in which the individual would be free. They had made him a hero of the masses. And as he watched the crowds surge around Wilson, Bernays began to wonder whether it would be possible to do the same type of mass persuasion, but in peacetime.
Liberty is based on individual freedom. We are individual people. We are not the mass, so disdainfully referred to by Karl Marx and the socialist writers. The goals then, very simply stated, are to make the world over into a one world, new world order dictatorship controlled utterly and completely by this Committee of 300. How can they possibly carry out their goals? That's the next question that I'm often asked. They do it by dint and by virtue of their fantastic wealth and the fact that they control thousands of the top banking institutions, the political organizations. So the goals are a one-world dictatorship of the most brutal kind. And how they carry it out is they have these interface banks, insurance companies, mining conglomerates, every conceivable control in politics. And the British East India Company was the most powerful trading company in the world. They made their massive monies out of the dope trade. They first grew prime poppies in Kew Gardens in Kensington, London, got the best producing opium poppies. They then shipped them to Benares in India, where they began a massive plantation of poppies, opium producing poppies. They then used their famous tea clippers to transport the poppies in the form of raw opium to China. And by their military force they imposed an opium policy on China that turned the Chinese nation into a nation of addicts. And they enforced this policy, which was known to the royal family and Lord Gladstone, the Prime Minister, and every one of the lords and ladies in England. And they made a massive, huge fortune. The problem is quite simple. Anarchy and chaos prevails in Washington, D.C. because the federal government has seized powers to which it is not entitled to and is passing masses of laws that are 100% unconstitutional. And when you get men setting themselves up as greater than the Constitution of the United States, you get anarchy and eventually tyranny. It's taken me 25 years to come to the conclusion that I have come to. And I want to tell you that one of the biggest things I discovered in my work was the existence of a supranational committee composed of 300 men. I came across this quite by accident when I was serving in Africa, in Angola, and I was given a series of documents which were only supposed to be handed in to top-level people. They were what we call above the top level of classification of intelligence documents. And there I discovered that whilst I thought I was in Africa fighting against the invasion of the communists, I was in fact fighting to introduce socialist regimes in the black African countries, and that I was actually working for a committee called the Committee of 300, also known in intelligence circles as the Olympians. They had so much money, which was the outcome of the drug trade, the years of investing, the years of gaining control of every mining, mineral, gold, oil, natural resource of the world, that they can afford to finance these things. So the black nobility are the ancient aristocrats of Venice and Genoa, and they called that because of the nature of their deeds. The black Guelphs were one of the worst of them. Now, interesting enough, the Queen of England, Queen Elizabeth II, is a Guelph. She's not a Windsor. This is a title that was evolved in 1935 by her father to put researchers off the track. I like to include myself in that category, although I wasn't doing it then. I was much too young to be doing it, but he didn't like that certain people were getting hot on the track of who this royal family actually was, and so this was put out that they are the House of Windsor. They are not. They're the House of Guelph, and it's important for us to know that, because every time there's a financial crisis, it follows a meeting of the black Guelphs upon the Royal Britannia yacht of the Queen of England, which anchors off the coast of Venice, and all the world bankers meet over there and say, now this is what we're going to do to country X, this is how we're going to control this worldwide situation. And then they go off and give their orders to everybody. So that is the way it is done. I told you earlier that they controlled the United States even in the days of President Lincoln. They had him assassinated on the orders of Disraeli. And they then, of course, in later years, were able to elect one of the worst socialists we've ever had the misfortune to suffer under, Woodrow Wilson. Wilson was elected by a ploy. Of course, they got Teddy Roosevelt and the Bull Moose Party running as a supposedly third candidate to siphon votes off so that Wilson could be elected as a socialist president. Now, our eyes have been fixed on Moscow. We've been led down the garden path, ladies and gentlemen. All of the time we've been looking at Moscow, and we've been told what demons they are in Moscow. Rightly so. But all the time this was going on, the Trojan horse of socialism in Washington, D.C. has been stealing our country away from us. Now, in case you don't know MI6, it is the most powerful and the oldest of all intelligence agencies in the world. They taught the CIA. They taught the Vatican intelligence. They taught the French intelligence. They taught the Mossad. They taught the Cheka. Captain Hill of MI6 went out and set up the Mossad. And Captain Hill went to Russia and helped the Bolsheviks set up their single-cell apparatus.
They're going to lose $15 to $20 billion every year they get from the American taxpayers. And Brian Gumbel says, what are you talking about? They only get $3 billion. And I said, Brian, that's only the foreign aid bill. Look at all the other trade compacts, economic assistance, military assistance. I'm saying this to you right now. Israel gets approximately $15 billion a year from the American taxpayers. That $15 billion is $30,000 for every man, woman, and child. And people in my district are losing their pension benefits. So I was targeted big time.
By the Israelis?
The Israeli Supreme Court looked at the evidence, could not refute it. And it came from the Justice Department, Greta. And they said, take him home. I brought him home and he was bombarded ever since.
Home to Ohio.
Now he's in Germany fighting for his life.
And joining us from Ipswich, the former MI5 agent David Shaler. David, is this the end of the conspiracy theories?
I don't think so, because it's very unlikely the Stevens report will come to definitive conclusions about certain evidence. The actual white Fiat Uno that was spotted hitting the black Mercedes in the tunnel has never been traced. A white Fiat Uno was traced to a paparazzo who was there on the day, someone called James Anderson. But he was found some months later, 250 miles from his home, in a burnt-out car. Now, the French concluded that was suicide, but suspicious people like me would say that has all the hallmarks of an intelligence service assassination. And certainly, he was telling his friends that he knew about the death of Princess Diana. There'll always be question marks as well about why the CCTV cameras on the French roads were not working that night. And why, for example, Mohammed Al-Fayed, somebody tried to sell Mohammed Al-Fayed fake documents implicating the CIA and MI6. This was a guy called Oswald Lewinter, who I know was an MI6 disinformation agent. And that's what's known as a straw man operation, to tempt Mohammed Al-Fayed to using those documents to prove his case. But of course, when they were proved to be fakes, the whole case would have fallen apart. But I think the British people can see through these things as well. We've got to bear in mind the Hutton inquiry was an absolute whitewash. The Scott report in the 1990s into arms in Iraq gathered loads of very convincing evidence that there was wrongdoing. But the conclusions of these reports always give the intelligence service a clean bill of health no matter what. There is a lot of evidence that the Stevens inquiry won't be able to deal with, to do with things like, I say, the white Fiat Uno, the fact that Henri Paul was working for other intelligence services, the fact that the Mercedes itself was replaced at the last minute. We're expected to believe that a brand new Mercedes wouldn't start and was replaced with another one. So Tom Bauer's arguments about they wouldn't have had time to plan this, they could have quite easily done that. And we know that Princess Diana was to go to Palestine and start campaigning on behalf of the Palestinian people. And of course she took the world's media wherever she went. That would have meant that Israel, the state of Israel, would have been embarrassed to have cameras from the world's media showing how they are oppressing the Palestinian people, and they simply couldn't tolerate that. The only question really is who killed them. Was it Mossad or was it MI6?
Now, some of the country's top medical and legal experts are demanding a full inquest into the death of the government weapons inspector, Dr. David Kelly. Lord Hutton's report into the cause of Dr. Kelly's death found he died after cutting his wrists, but the signatories of a letter to the Times insist that conclusion is unsafe. They say in their letter it's extremely unlikely from a medical perspective that the primary cause of death would or could have been hemorrhage from a severed ulnar artery in one wrist without any evidence of a blood clotting deficiency. Well, Dr. David Kelly was found dead in woods near his Oxfordshire home in July 2003 after he was exposed as the source for a BBC report questioning the grounds for the Iraq War. In August that year, an inquest into his death was adjourned and it was never reopened. Lord Hutton took over the investigation of the death and returned his findings in 2004. In January this year, it emerged that Lord Hutton secretly classified all medical and scientific records on Dr. Kelly for 70 years.
The Human Genome Project is a worldwide collaboration of scientists who are aiming to map where the different genes are within the human chromosomes, what they actually do, what they code for, what they produce as an effect within the body of each of us as individuals. The Human Genetic Diversity Project is trying to collect information on the similarities and differences in different ethnic groups. They are therefore producing information about the different spread of normal genes in different populations.
Scientists collaborating in the Genetic Diversity Project have already identified a genetic marker present in the DNA of Palestinians, but not in the DNA of Israelis. One individual genetic marker wouldn't accurately identify an ethnic group, but a combination could.
If you add together a number of different markers for different populations, you can start to become relatively specific. So, for example, the way in which we handle milk lactose is different between the Asian and European populations. If you then add in blood groups, ABO blood groups, very different distributions. If you also add in height, skin colour, and so on, you start to be able to become specific to your target population.
Once all these genetic markers have been identified, a virus could be designed to look for them on entering the body. It would scan the DNA of cells, looking for the markers. If it finds them, it inserts itself into the host DNA and starts the process of infection. In this way, the virus would be targeted to attack only people who had the right genetic markers. The British Medical Association believed that in the next 10 years, a lethal germ might be created that could select its victims by genetic characteristics. A biological agent that could successfully wipe out entire groups in society. The world's first ethnic weapon. An organism that could target specific people would mark the coming of age of biological weapons. For the first time, there would be no risk of infection to the aggressor. More useful than a nuclear bomb, it would leave land, buildings, and your own troops untouched. And as the proliferation of nuclear technology has shown, once the knowledge is available, it is almost impossible to contain.
With British Prime Minister Lloyd George up against a wall, Lionel Rothschild and the Jewish Zionists offered the British a deal they couldn't refuse. "We'll bring the United States into the war as your ally and win the war for you," they said, "if you'll promise us Palestine." In April of 1917, President Wilson got the green light and declared war on Germany. Because of overwhelming opposition to the war, Wilson invoked the draft and passed the Espionage Act, forcing Americans to fight or be thrown in jail. Billions of U.S. taxpayers' money was delivered to the British war machine, money that was never repaid. In return, the British government wrote the famous Balfour Declaration and addressed it to none other than Lord Lionel Rothschild. The declaration promised Palestine and Israel to the Rothschild Zionists.